Welcome to the Bookies Plus weekly betting show where you'll get free NFL picks for week 12 from 4 of our gambling experts. Now, you can also find free picks at bookies.com/picks. And it's not only NFL picks, about any sport you like, got you covered there. So definitely want to bookmark that. And remember, every Wednesday, new episode of the show throughout the NFL season. This week, we'll have picks from Bill Speros, the senior betting analyst at bookies.com. You got Adam, the ATM Thompson, been hitting over 60% of his NFL picks over the past 3 years, one of the nation's premier handicappers. You got Nick the Whale Whalen, been in the industry for over a decade, NFL, NBA, works at RotoWire. You see him on VSiN and DraftKings as well. And I'm Jim Coventry. All right, time to get to the picks. Bill Speros, you like the Denver Broncos this week, and a couple of us are going to talk about it afterwards. Go right ahead.
Well, first off, you'll see all the trend lines here pointing toward the Raiders. They've won and covered 8 straight times against Denver at home. But there's a big difference this time. Probably for the first time in 8 years, the Broncos have a real quarterback in Bo Nix. He was terrific last week against Atlanta. Threw for 4 touchdowns, 300 yards, 307 yards, actually. The Raiders basically tapped out Sunday in Miami. They no-showed in the fourth quarter. I'm not sure Antonio Pierce is long for this coaching world, especially after this season. I'm not quite sure how much of an effort we're going to see from the Raiders. The Broncos are really sharp, strong defensively, almost beat the Chiefs. I like this game a lot. I like this number. I don't see LA being any sort of a home field advantage. Actually, this might become Denver Southwest this week. It's a very quick flight from Denver to Vegas. Made it many times when I lived there. You're going to hear a lot of Broncos fans. You're going to see a lot of Broncos fans. And I really, really like this quarterback in this game.
Yeah, and I'm with you on this pick. This is one of my 3 out, so I'll go on with this one as well. Bo Nix a point guard, and the Raiders struggle to cover anyway, and it's going to be Bo Nix a pick where he wants to go. The running game, the offensive line has clicked very well, and the Raiders have the appearance of good run defense, not against a team that can get downhill against you. And that's what this line's going to do. This line's going to get downhill against them. Javonte Williams is back in his job, which really helps because he gives them at least the chance for some explosive plays. Not much to add here to what Bill said. I just don't think the Raiders are going to be able to move the ball. Jacoby Myers has been good, but it's going to be Patrick Surtain on one side, Riley Moss on the other. Good luck with that. Brock Bowers probably gets a little bit done, but that rushing attack, they're not going to move the ball. They're going to be in constant 3rd and long, 2nd and long. It's not a script for Gardner Minshew against a team that brings a whole lot of heat on every down, especially passing. If they know you have to pass, it's lights out. Like Bill said, trends may go to the Raiders, but the Broncos, look, to make the playoffs, they got to keep winning. They can't afford to have a gaffe anywhere along the line. Now, Nick, you also like this game from an over-under perspective.
Yeah, I certainly lean Broncos on the spread. It feels like a number to me that's maybe a point and a half lower than it should be, which, causes me a little bit of pause here. You do wonder if this Denver team that's been running hot of late offensively, could this be somewhat of a letdown spot? But I like the under here, 41.5. I know this, when they met for the first time in week 5 in Denver, went way over this total. Both of these teams have been over teams this year, which is a little surprising. But, again, I think the Broncos are coming off of essentially a best case offensive game last week against a terrible Atlanta defense, a Falcons team that just completely no-showed that game on both ends. So I think we see a little bit of regression. Are the Broncos scoring touchdowns on 4 of their first 5 drives? Probably not. But either way, I think this could be one of those games that mirrors last week against Atlanta, because you said it, Jim, the Raiders are not going to be able to move the ball on this Denver team. They got to 18 points in the first meeting. I don't think that's happening again. This Raiders team is a historically bad running team. They are far and away the worst rushing team in the NFL this season. And there are some other very bad running teams. Think about the Dallas Cowboys, who are terrible running the ball. The Raiders are significantly worse than Dallas. Their top 2 running backs are also injured coming into the week. So they're going to have no choice but to throw on this Denver defense and throw on Patrick Surtain. Good luck with that. It's the number 4 pass defense in the NFL. The Broncos are getting a ton of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They lead the NFL in sacks. They're 3rd in yards per attempt allowed. we'll see. If Brock Bowers can carry the Raiders to 14 points here, maybe it gets a little bit dicey. But I think we see kind of a conservative game from both sides in division where this Broncos defense really suffocates the Raiders offense.
Well, with three of us talking Raiders and Broncos, that left Adam Thompson out. But Adam, you're going to talk about the Dolphins -7, and if you had anything you had to add to the game that we beat to death, go right ahead.
I'm going to go hammer the Denver Broncos after listening to all of you, and the under. Maybe a parlay could do that, but Miami, taking on New England, and we've been waiting for this Miami team to kind of show up. It took a little longer than expected with Tua back, but I think now we've kind of seen it. They scored a season high 34 last week. The week before, they allowed a season best 15 versus the Rams the week prior. So now they take on a New England team that was held to 10, that they held to 10 points back in week 5. And that was with, they had Tyler Huntley that game. Tua is obviously there this game. I think they should win this by at least a touchdown. It's 7. It looks like it's actually trending towards 6.5. Tua is 6-0 all time against the spread against this New England team. And Drake May, I was liking what he was doing, but I think the rest of the team still has some ground to catch. He can't do it all, and this is one of the premier pass defenses in the league. So I think it's a bad spot for New England, even at home, which it's not. It's in Miami, actually. So I think that's a lot of trouble. So -7, I like that number. I'm going to wait to see if it drops to 6.5. But either way, I like Miami.
So in our first pick, each of us went with a divisional favorite. I know Nick took the under on the game. What could go wrong? Sorry, second time around. Bill, you're going to talk about the Ravens -2 against the Chargers. Then I'm going to talk about the over and under in that game.
Did you say Ravens? Oh, let me get
the Baltimore Ravens.
What's
-2.
Ravens.
Uh-oh. Ravens flock.
Yep.
All right.
Time to liquidate the 401k. I got the Ravens hat. Look, okay, Ravens. They cannot beat the Steelers. We've established that. They tried, but there's something about Pittsburgh. The Ravens can't get past. However, this Chargers team is going to be very interesting. I think that the Chargers have the #1 scoring defense in the league, but they haven't played Lamar Jackson yet. They haven't faced, Lamar Jackson rolling out, Derrick Henry running the ball, Zay Flowers extending the field. I think this is just a level too much for the Chargers. And of course, we know that home games don't really matter. And Inglewood, I would imagine there'll be a lot of purple and clad fans, black fans, a lot of purple and black clad hat people. It's going to be a Baltimore crowd. I just think, Justin Herbert will be a lot of points in this one. You can see kind of a OG AFC Chargers Dolphins type shootout here. But the Ravens have Justin Tucker, and on a 2-point line, I'm going to roll with him until he misses. So I just think that here's a close game, and you have a field goal kicker who's going to be kicking basically indoors. He's probably good from 60 in that place. So I just think you have a high-scoring close game, and the Ravens just kind of hold the edge, at least on a 2-point line.
So Bill, I like the over in this game, and I like your call on the Ravens minus the points here, obviously, as well. But the over, what I see here is, and you kind of mentioned it, the Chargers have a great defensive scheme. It is way better than their talent. When you play Baltimore, you got to have both. You can't just scheme up and take away now with Lamar and Derrick Henry. Henry is the straw that stirs the drink. And after last week, like you said, against Pittsburgh, this team has 4 losses, Baltimore. They are probably playing road playoff games unless they go on a run. They can't afford to lose a game. They have to be more aggressive offensively than they've been. And the Chargers don't have the horse. But what does that lead to the over? Well, the other side of the ball. The Ravens are one of those teams very hard to run the football against. And J.K. Dobbins has been good, very inefficient. Against this defense, it's going to be very hard for that running game to get any traction. And then they're going to probably be trailing. Well, what does that leave? Justin Herbert. And we know the Ravens don't have a great pass rush this year, and they can't cover to save their lives. It's not one receiver that's going to beat them. It's any of them because Justin Herbert's finding them all. It could be McConkey. It could be Quentin Johnston. It could be Josh Palmer, Will Dissly. It doesn't matter. He's playing at a super high level. So Herbert is going to try to keep up with them. It won't be enough to win, but I think this game could flirt with 60 points. Anybody else have any words on this game before we kick to the next one?
I like your guys' call on Baltimore here. I think it's interesting because the Chargers proved last week that they can play in a shootout, right? I mean, this is a team that prefers to win every game like 23-16 if they can. But, I think Justin Herbert still proved that deep down, he's that guy, even if he doesn't have the weapons. So I think if this does turn into a shootout, I don't think the Chargers necessarily fade away, but I do trust Baltimore more in that spot. And we have to keep in mind the level up in competition here defensively. I know the Baltimore secondary is leaky, and that really worries me if this does turn into a shootout. But, man, that Cincinnati defense, 29th in EPA, 27th against the pass, 29th against the run. Again, Baltimore has its faults, but it's a better defensive unit by far than what Cincinnati is throwing out there. So I think, again, if this is a close game, getting this under 3 with Baltimore, I think is the right call.
So next we're going to go both Adam and Nick like the Eagles. Since Nick just spoke, we'll go to Adam and then Nick can pile on. And the Eagles -2.5.
Yeah, -2.5, and they're surging. They won 6 in a row. They've all been by more than a field goal. And while the Rams, you have to worry about Stafford that they can score at any moment. That defense ranks bottom half versus both the run and the pass. I think that's going to be an issue slowing an Eagles team that could do a lot of different things. They're averaging almost 31 points a game over the last 5 weeks. They are clicking finally. They're also 5-1 against the spread on the road, which in by definition this is a road game. We'll see who's cheering for who when the game actually starts, but. Yeah, I like the Eagles -2.5. I think you always have to worry about the Rams scoring, especially late. But this is a great number to get if you can get it, because there won't be the odds of a backdoor cover here are low. So I think you could ride with Saquon and Philly here.
Matthew Stafford. Before Nick, go ahead. You pile on this game, and then I'll just make a comment afterwards. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I think Adam laid it out pretty well. What I like about the Eagles this season is that they start every game slowly and yet still end up covering pretty easily. They've been, one of the best second half teams in the NFL this year, where other teams are getting worn down, toward the end of the third quarter into the fourth. It feels like that's when the Eagles start to hit their peak. And, they've scored 14 first quarter points in 10 games, 14. And yet they still continue to blow out inferior competition. It feels like on a week-to-week basis. So I also lean under on this game, partially because of that. I think we could see another slow start for Philly. I know the total's actually down 1.5 compared to where it was about 24 hours ago, but I would lean under on 49 here. Philly's a really good defense. They get pressure. They stuff the run. I know the Rams played an excellent offensive game last week. I thought it was pretty easily Matthew Stafford's best game of the year. And, that was still a game that was in the balance late in the fourth quarter against the New England Patriots. This Rams team struggles to close out games. It feels like every single week, they'll have like a 6 to 8 point lead, and then they'll go 3 and out. They just can't quite put that finishing score on the board. And I worry about that team as games go along. Rams just kind of no-showed against the Miami Dolphins at home 2 weeks ago. We haven't really seen Philly have a game like that in a long time. So I think this is a good spot for Philly, even if they get off to a slow start, to eventually grind down that Rams defense on the ground. And we have to keep in mind, Jalen Hurts did not play well last week. I thought that was his worst game of the year. They still beat a very good Washington team by multiple scores after putting up 3 points in the first half. So I like the under, and I like the Eagles.
Yeah, a couple quick points here too. The defense for the Rams has been nice. This offensive line of the Eagles is going to grind them into powder. That is a terrible mismatch. And then Adam and Nick both mentioned Matthew Stafford. Stafford's been, when he's under pressure, he's looking like an aging quarterback. He used to be the guy to shred pressure. That offensive line's not blocking well against the pass. This is a team that's going to really challenge that. Those are a couple things I want to add. Bill, anything else on that game before you tell us about Dallas and the Washington under?
I'm high on the Eagles right now. Outside of Detroit, they're playing the best of any team in the NFC. And those two teams are really breaking away. I'm not looking really too concerned about the records, but my God, San Francisco, might not even make the playoffs this year.
Right.
So, they're enjoying the same post Super Bowl defeat letdown that the Eagles enjoyed last year. And the Eagles had finally recovered from that. They're getting better and better. They put on a clinic against Dallas. They could have hung 50 if they wanted to. So I think Philly's a great play from here on out. And, you might want to start looking at futures markets for them.
And then,
Well,
Bill, talk about the Dallas-Washington under game.
Yeah, this one is at 45.5. And Dallas has given up 34 points in consecutive weeks and still hasn't hit this number in points. So I'm thinking if you're giving up 34 points and you're going under this total, they went over the 41 was the number on Monday, but they went under the week before. That was 42 on a 34-6 game. So I just, to me, it's just like you have the Commanders they're still trying to figure it out. And Dallas is the best get right opportunity in the NFL right now. I mean, it's like a train wreck wrapped in a plane crash and covered by the Hindenburg explosion. And I think Jerry Jones is his ultimate punishment for Mike McCarthy is that he's not going to fire him this year. He's actually going to make him stick this out, which is far more painful than firing him and letting him go. This is his payback. He's making him suffer alongside Steven in the booth. And of course, we all know that, Jake Paul has more wins in Dallas this year than the Cowboys. Of course, this game's in Washington. But Dallas can't score. Cooper Rush, come on. And, again, Washington could score 30, 34 points, and this one will still go under because Dallas won't break. They barely broke double digits on Monday, and I don't know how they come close to doing it here.
Well, and unlike Jake Paul, they can't get somebody to throw a fight for him because, Tyson's training and what we saw in that fight, Tyson was pulling punches, definitely didn't try. Took the payday, though.
He carried him the last 4 rounds of the fight. That was obvious. I think if Jake Paul wanted to, he could have put him in the hospital or worse.
There was video where Tyson could have just completely knocked out and held his punch. When they went in the corner at one point, Jake Paul whispered in his ear. Tyson tapped his shoulder. Tyson, again, he was probably told at that point, back off. I guess there were things in the contract. The longer the fight went, the more money Tyson would make. I guess that's another story. Anybody else comments on the fight?
Easiest, minus 220, but you never feel guilty about winning a bet, but that almost felt like stealing money.
No doubt. So one more thing on Dallas, Washington. Dan Quinn comes back to coach against his team. And man, this is not going to be pretty, like Bill said. Anybody else have a comment on that before we get to Adam and the Lions? Then we go to Adam and the Lions.
All right. Hey, speaking of the 49ers, I looked this up a couple days ago, or at least I noticed that there's only one team in the NFL right now that ranks top 10 passing the ball, top 10 rushing the ball, top 10 fewest rush yards allowed, and top 10 fewest pass yards allowed. And it is the 5-5 San Francisco 49ers. So take for that what you want out of it. Speaking of taking something, we're going to take the Detroit Lions. I'm finally jumping. Bill takes them every single week, and it seems to work very nicely for him. It's at minus 7.5, which isn't the greatest number in the world, on the road especially. But again, it's a number that's actually trending to minus 7. So I'm going to wait till it's an officially at the Bookies Plus, bookies.com/picks. It's not up there yet, but it's going to be eventually. They've scored 31 points in 5 of their last 7 games. They scored 24 and 26 in the other 2. So nobody is really truly stopping these guys right now. India ranks, bottom 6 versus the run and the pass. So I don't see that changing here, especially in a dome once again. And Anthony Richardson is back out there. That worked last week. They scored 28 points against the Jets, but still impressive. But his previous 5 starts, they averaged well under 20 points per game. And I think it's just going to be hard to keep up, because Detroit's going to score 30 plus in this one. Can Indy keep up and keep it within a touchdown? Well, the Lions have, I think they rank 3rd in the NFL in fewest touchdowns in the red zone, which means, Anthony Richardson's going to have to go 9 for 21 for 230 yards which he's done before, but I don't see it happening here against this Detroit team. They did just lose another linebacker. That's a little concerning. Who's going to fill that spot? But I think Dan Campbell, if anybody can find somebody to juice them up to be ready for it, I think it's him. So yeah, I like Detroit against all or nothing Richardson, even on the road here.
Anybody else have anything on the Lions game?
It would have to be Lions for me in that game. Go ahead, Bill. You first.
They've played 2 AFC South teams this year. They have outscored them 104-20.
Ooh, bit of a whooping there. Nice. And what do you got on that one, Nick? And then after you make your comment, go ahead and grab the Chiefs, and I'll pile on the Chiefs.
Yeah, we don't need to name one of those AFC South teams that they put 52 on within the last few days here, but I think we all saw that coming. I think the Colts are a little bit overvalued here. I think Adam's right. This is going to get to 7. It is at 7 right now at Bet Rivers. If you're in an area where you can lay that down, I would do that. I don't think it gets to 6.5. I'd be very surprised if we pass the key number, but either way, it's got to be Lions here. I think people are buying back in on Anthony Richardson after last week. I get it. It was the best game of his career. We need to remember how bad the Jets are, specifically this Jets defense, man. We know the offense's issues. They haven't even reached 300 yards in 3 straight games, but the Jets defense has been coasting on reputation all season. Just because we think of them as the great unit from last year, they can't tackle, they can't defend, they can't stop the run. I think that was a big reason why Anthony Richardson looked as good as he did last week. And he still had a key turnover that allowed the Jets to take the lead early in the third quarter. So the thing with Detroit at this point, guys, they're such a wagon. They're so well-rounded. Like they don't even have to play a great game to win by more than a touchdown. They could play like a B-level game against a team like Indy and still be just fine. I mean, the Colts are 5th in the NFL in terms of the most rushing yards allowed per game. I think this is a game where both Gibbs and Montgomery should be able to feast. It's not a good secondary for the Colts. I mean, they gave up 37 to the Jacksonville Jaguars earlier this year. We need to remember that. They gave up the 2nd highest yards per play game in the NFL this season to Jacksonville. If you're doing that against Jacksonville, how's it going to look against Detroit?
Not much to add to that. Why don't you go with the Chiefs, Nick? That'll be our last pick, and I'll pile on.
Yeah, so we got the Chiefs at 10.5. It's dicey with Kansas City because it's not a team that tends to blow out even vastly inferior opponents, but this is an auto fade of the Panthers here, and I know the Panthers have won 2 in a row. I know Bryce Young has looked a little bit better. I don't put a ton of stock into the Giants or the Saints. The Saints absolutely should have won that game. They vastly outgained the Panthers, just couldn't close it out. Just kind of what the Saints do. And then, Daniel Jones played one of the worst games we've seen from any quarterback in that game over in Germany. So I don't really feel like the Panthers have as much momentum as it might seem. I think the Kansas City defense dominates this game. I could totally see the KC offense messing around. Mahomes throws a pick on a tip ball. It feels like he does every single week now. But I think the Kansas City defense completely shuts down whatever Bryce Young has going here. I know Jonathan Brooks will be in the mix for Carolina. We'll see if that's any sort of boost. I find it hard to believe that he's going to give them any more than Chuba Hubbard has this season. He's been really good. Kansas City needs to keep winning, too, by virtue of losing last week. I mean, if they want the 1 seed, Buffalo's hot on their tail. Pittsburgh's hot on their tail. This is not really a spot where they can afford a letdown by any means. Should get Isaiah Pacheco back this week. I think that should bring some much-needed explosiveness to that running game, which just feels like it's Kareem Hunt, 2.5 yards and a cloud of dust every single week. So I think that'll look a lot better. This could be a spot, guys, where I think the Panthers could struggle to score any points. We have not had a single shutout in the NFL this season. We had 8 shutouts last year. We are going into week 12 without a single shutout. This might be the spot. I also like the under 43.5. I don't think Carolina holds up its end of the bargain here.
Yeah, I also am going with the Chiefs minus 10.5 here. Nick had a lot of great points. A couple things I'll add. We know the Chiefs want to run the ball. That's their main method of operation right now. And the Panthers just simply cannot stop the run. They have no high-level defenders. The ones they had are injured. And they can't commit extra bodies to stop the run because you can't put nobody in the back end against Patrick Mahomes. So they have no option to do that. And so therefore, this is a bludgeoning. That's all it is. Very simple and painless. And so they'll move the ball at will. Panthers have no method to stop them. And on the other side of the ball, you got Bryce Young. And look, Steve Spagnuolo is not going to take this week off. He's going to throw some complicated looks, and he'll give you the middle of the field a little bit. So maybe if Adam Thielen comes back and get a few catches, Jatavian Sanders. But the run game, the Panthers have been good in the run. The Chiefs have been great against the run. And if they can't run the ball and Bryce Young's in obvious passing situations, we're going to probably see 3 interceptions here. So this one's going to get ugly. Like Nick said, usually the Chiefs don't put teams away. There's going to be no alternative most likely here. So any other words on this game, fellas?
It looks like I'm changing my pick on that one.
Nick, final thought for the week. I know you got a good one on the Thursday night game, and then we'll ask everybody what their final thoughts of the week are.
Yeah, so we normally don't talk a whole lot about the TNF games just by virtue of, doing this video on Wednesday. We wanted to have shelf life, but got to get this out there, guys. The total is 36.5 in this Steelers-Browns game, which is very low. One of the lowest totals we've seen all year. For what it's worth on the spread, I would lean Steelers 3.5, but that's more of a stay away for me. I love the under on this low number. We need to take into account, one, the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers just won a game last week without scoring a single touchdown. They're totally comfortable playing in the mud like that. Cleveland has scored more than 20 points, I believe, once this entire season. That came in the Baltimore game. So we already have 2 low-scoring teams. We have 2 teams that love going under. And if you take a look at the weather forecast for Cleveland, Ohio on Thursday night, here's what I'm seeing right now, according to weather.com. At 8 p.m. Central Time, 20-mile-per-hour winds, 60% chance of precipitation, a mix of rain and snow. And what we know for sure is that it's going to be extremely windy. What we don't know is whether we're going to get rain or snow throughout the game, whether or not that precipitation ends up impacting the game. Either way, when we're talking about a game with 22-mile-per-hour winds and a Cleveland team that cannot run the ball, I think that is a complete recipe for disaster. I think the Steelers can play this conservatively. They're not going to ask Russell Wilson to do a whole lot. They're just going to pound Jalen Warren. They're going to pound Najee Harris. The Browns also have the worst kicker in the NFL. He can't make a 27-yard field goal in a dome. I don't think he's going to be able to put points on the board in this game with the howling wind. Under 36.5 for Thursday night.
Bill Speros, final thoughts for the week.
Tomorrow, the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, which is having an adjudicatory hearing as we speak about DraftKings for taking credit card bets, is going to meet and discuss next steps in regarding player limits. This is a big deal. This is a huge issue with a lot of people who are limited for what they don't understand, usually after winning, or if they find a strategy online that helps them to win. Massachusetts is the first jurisdiction to tackle this issue. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow, but you could very well likely see rules and regulations proposed that would take a time to flush through the system. So, and Massachusetts has become kind of a leader in some of this stuff where other states are following. So if you see, eventually Massachusetts either restrict player limits or force the operators to kind of, at the very least, disclose why players are limited, that's going to be a significant change for a lot of people online who have felt this, kind of inexplicably boycott. All of a sudden I can't place a bet. It happens a lot. They say it doesn't happen a lot. It's a big deal. It's something to keep an eye on, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens tomorrow in terms of how they plan to proceed with this.
And Bill certainly will hope for a follow-up next week if there's anything new to report on that, but that's an exceptional concept to cover in this particular show. Adam Thompson, any closing thoughts on the week 12?
I've kind of hinted at this a few times, but a little plug to Bookies.com and to RotoWire.com, who each have pages that could show you the best possible odds for a game at that exact moment and where to get them, because it means something. I mean, Philly minus 2.5 right now, that could move to 3. Lions 7.5 at some spots, minus 7 other spots. Miami might drop down to 6.5. Look at those pages, because that will mean something in the long term if you use it.
I think, did somebody freeze or did I freeze? All right, maybe I froze. So we'll continue.
Okay.
All right, looks like I'm back. All right, looks like I froze for a minute. So Adam Thompson, were you finished what you thought, or were you still carrying on?
I think I finished.
Okay, yeah, I think I froze for a second. All right, everybody, this has been the Bookies Plus weekly gambling show. Be sure to bookmark bookies.com/picks so you can check out our free picks. Remember, for the NFL and other sports as well, we'll have a new episode every Wednesday. So join us next week. Good luck to everybody, and we will see you next week.